Good morning, everybody. Today is Thursday, the 14th of January, and today we are learning to use relative clauses to add relevant detail. I am going to give you another editing exercise today. So you are going to add in the correct punctuation to the sentence below. The tallest one shouted, "Get over here." Please copy this sentence out onto a lined piece of paper or type it up if you are typing your writing this week with the correct punctuation included, and pause the video here now. Please press play once you are ready to find out the answers. Okay, great job everybody. Hopefully you managed to find all of the mistakes in this sentence. If you haven't already, please pause it now before I reveal the answers, which I'm going to here. I'm going to use a red pen so that stands out a little bit more. I do apologise for the lighting in this video as well. It seems a bit blue on the screen. I'm not really sure why. I have tried a few different lights, but hopefully it's still clear enough for you to see the work on the page. So first of all, hopefully you spotted that I need a capital T at the beginning of my sentence here, not a small t. So I'm going to cross out this one. I want a capital T, so you get a tick if you got that one correct. The tallest one shouted. Now I've got speech over here, so I need to remember a few details for speech. I want to use a comma because I've got speech happening here. My inverted commas after the comma, and then I need to remember a capital G because it's the first word of speech, and end the inverted commas here. So well done if you got all of those corrections. Please edit in any that you didn't include. I'm just going to cross out this G before proceeding with the rest of the lesson. Okay, so we are ready to proceed with the rest of our innovative right now. Paragraph 4, this is when Zoe is discovered by the teenagers on Neil's Island. They're very suspicious of her, and maybe rightfully so. They don't know who she is, and it's an incredibly testing time, and they become suspicious with her after having a conversation. So our steps of success, referring to my luck ran out. This is the moment when she has been travelling across Eel Island, maybe for a short while, doesn't need a lot of detail, and she bumps into the teenagers. Then she interacts with them, so we're going to use some speech, hence our do now punctuated speech, just to remind us of those of the punctuation needed and what we need to include. And then finally, the foes become suspicious. So after having a conversation with Zoe, they maybe form a huddle, she can hear them talking, and it's clear what they think she's there for. So we get plenty of opportunities to use new ideas and to move away from the model, which is always our words of encouragement, to use your own ideas, draw from your own vocabulary. So relative clauses. Relative clauses add relevant information about a noun usually. So there are plenty of opportunities throughout this to include them. Usually they will need a comma to separate them from the rest of the main clause, unless the relative clause is needed for the sentence to make sense, and the main clause depends on the relative clause, but that is usually quite more rare, so most of the time you will need a comma. So my luck running out. So sorry, before I move on to that, we've got a vocabulary sheet that you may want to look at before the lesson, or pause after each coloured section and then refer to the vocabulary and see where that could have fit in with this shared text, as my example is only one example. There are many different ways of rewriting this, so please try your best to use, as I said, your own sentence structures, your own ideas in your writing today. So for relative clauses for the red section, we could talk about the island itself. So we could have, I travelled across the island for around half an hour. There's some span of time for a short while. Maybe sounds a bit better than giving a specific time. I travelled across the new island for a short while. The island, maybe not wanted to repeat island, but the island, which I later found out was named Eels Island, firstly seemed to offer no answers, or seemed to be deserted, using one of our reading vocabulary words. You might also refer to the teenagers when you find them, their reaction, hushed into silence. That's some show not tell, showing that they're very suspicious, that they're taken by surprise. You might have whose jaws dropped open, using a different relative pronoun, whose, for that one, the teenagers who stared at me angrily made me stop dead in my tracks. So you might think about how they reacted, their expressions, or about the island. I certainly wouldn't have two close together in the same section, because that would just seem very overdone and it just wouldn't flow very well. So it's up to you where you want your relative clause to be, and think about which noun you're going to get a more interesting relative clause about. So I'm going to start writing. So let me get my red pen. And I'm going to just refer back to yesterday's paragraph when Zoe had arrived at Eels Island, had brought the boat to shore and had set off. So I'm going to continue with that for cohesion across the paragraphs. And I don't want to use an opener in this one. I had a lot of openers yesterday. So I'm just going to have, I had not been walking for long. And then you could have encountered a group of teenagers, met a group of teenagers, until I was faced with a group of teenagers for long, until I was confronted by a group of teenagers. I'm going to use a relative clause to describe the teenagers. You may want to describe the island if you're referring to it earlier on. Group of teenagers, because teenagers, I want to use who is my relative pronoun. Who did not look pleased to see me. So I'm just going to check this section back to make sure I'm happy with it. I had not been walking for long until, I keep forgetting to dot my I's, I'm really sorry, it's a really bad habit I've got, until I was confronted by a group of teenagers who did not look pleased to see me, remembering my comma to separate it from the main clause. Most of the time you will need a comma to separate them, unless, as I've said, the sentence for it to make sense depends on the relative clause. So my interaction with my foes, so you don't have to worry too much about the dialogue here, but pause the video now and think about how, what the teenagers may say. So you want to pick one of them out, because Zoe won't know their names yet. You might want to refer to them as the tallest one, or the shortest one, or the youngest looking one, or the one at the front spoke first and said, well, what sort of things would they want to know from Zoe? What comments might they make? Pause the video here while you have a think. Okay, wonderful. I'd really love to hear what ideas you had. I think it would make sense for the teenagers to be asking who she is, how she got here, what she wants from them. You might even have them sneering to one another, making rude comments. It's like, oh, look what washed up today, or well, who do we have here? And making a bit of a joke of maybe her looking lost or obviously confused at where she is. So I'm going to keep this bit quite simple. I'm just going to have my inverted commas first. I'm not going to do anything too fancy with this one. And I'm just going to go for a really simple question. What are you doing on our island? And because Zoe doesn't know their names, I'm just going to refer to them as one of them. Sorry, there are two inverted commas, they've just blended together. Questioned one of them, using them referring back to the teenagers who have just introduced. Going back to the vocabulary, here it was the tallest one who spoke first, a relative pronoun here, the first boy to speak, and then maybe give a description about their appearance, who had a menacing scar on his face, said, and then introduce the speech. The boy at the back, who was cracking his knuckles threateningly, gave me goosebumps. So you might want to have that after this, a line of speech from one of them, just to make it seem like Zoe's being ganged up on. And here we've got some ideas for within speech. So Zoe might actually use a relative clause to describe her situation. I've come from Norwich, where I've lived all of my life. I've come from Norwich, which is terribly flooded. end of comma, and I needed to find safety. I'm looking for my parents who, so except I'm here because I'm looking for my parents who accidentally left me behind on Norwich. So a few opportunities to use one here, but again, I wouldn't have two in the same section. I would choose one. So you want to make sure that you're using a new speaker on a new line, a really important rule to remember. So new speaker, new line. I'm going to just start with the speech at the beginning of the line again, and I'm going to think about how Zoe might respond. Because Zoe is outnumbered in this, I don't think she would be too confrontational. I think she would just go along with what they were suggesting. So I'm Zoe, full stop. We've got the I am, I'm is the verb, am is the verb, Zoe subject, full stop. I'm Zoe. You might want to think about maybe using some stuttering here. She's struggling to get her words out because she's nervous. So I've, for example, here. And this would have a full stop now too. I've come from Norwich. Then she might describe it a little bit. It's terrible there. You might want to maybe say that she's run out of supplies. It's incredibly flooded. It's terrible there. Then you would need a comma if you've not got any other sort of punctuation, inverted commas. And then how she retorted back, so I answered quickly. Again, it's not the main focus of this lesson, so it doesn't have to be too well developed or too showy. It's just to meet this step. It's terrible that I answered quickly. Full stop at the end of that sentence. Now, because I'm going to have a new speaker on a new line, I'm going to carry on, skip a line and move here. And I'm going to use a relative clause, I think, to describe one of the boys. So I referred to one of them earlier. I'm going to have a different one reply. So I'm going to refer to him as the second one because I don't know his name at this point. The second boy, and then I'm going to use a relative clause about him. Again, you could say who I later discovered was called, and then have the name, an action that he's doing, maybe something relevant about his appearance, as long as it adds relevant information to the story. We don't just want the second boy who had blonde hair, because that doesn't really add anything to our story. So the second boy who, and I'm going to have him be a little bit more intimidating. Who eyed me menacingly, comma. That's my relative clause here. And then thinking about how he spoke, snarled. And then another comma because it's before the speech. So it does seem like a lot of commas, but we need to have speech, and then remembering our capital letter for the first word. So I'm just going to have him say something quite short. You shouldn't be here. Again, you can choose what you want them to say. I've seen lots of really wonderful examples last week when we did dialogue as our focus. You shouldn't be here, full stop, end of inverted commas. So we are ready to move on to our final section now, our green section. The foes are becoming suspicious, and they most certainly are becoming suspicious, and as I said, maybe rightfully so. So this group of teenagers, they're going to discuss Zoe and her role on the island and whether they believe that she is to be trusted or not, or maybe why they think she's there. So to do that, for some cohesion, I'm going to describe how they have formed a huddle. They formed a huddle. You might have that they had some sort of gesture between themselves that they wanted to talk in private. They formed a huddle. But I could hear their conversation because they are trying to talk more privately, but I could hear their conversation. And this is the final opportunity for a relative clause in this section. So we can see here, I've got quite a few. Arriving at the island, which I hoped would offer me safety, seemed to be the worst decision I'd ever made. That would be a nice one to end on, to kind of reflect on the choices she's made. This one, now she was in trouble. I've used this one in my model, but it's just moved. You could move it slightly later on, that after they've had their discussion, who eyed me suspiciously had come to a decision. Maybe the effect of their discussion, which made my stomach churn, filled me with dread. This one I'm going to go with, I think, talking about who they thought she was. They thought I was a thief who had come to do this. Maybe even questioning how could they believe that a young girl like me, who was clearly terrified or who clearly posed no threat, could be. Maybe her concerns, worrying about her boat, which was only on the shore, it could be taken so easily. And maybe this one, using a who's Doobie, if you've already introduced that you know which one Doobie is, whose face twisted into a sinister snarl, and maybe they speak again. So lots of opportunities here. Pause the video now and think about which section you'd want to include your relative clause on, whether it's about the huddle, the effect of the huddle, reflecting on the mistakes that Zoe's made. So pause the video here while you think about where you want to put your relative clause. Okay, great job. So I'm going to have a bit of show not tell. So she's going to be feeling quite nervous by this. My stomach churned. When it became clear that they thought, have a think, what could they be thinking about her role? Why would she be there? Why are they so worried? They thought I was a spy. And then detail about the spy who was scouting for supplies. Okay, I'm just going to give this another read through and see if I want to make any changes, if I missed any punctuation out, as it is so easy to forget. I'm sorry that it's visualizer, I can't quite fit everything in one section. Apologies. So I had not been walking for long until I was confronted by a group of teenagers who did not look pleased to see me. So I'm quite happy with that relative clause there, describing the teenagers. So I'm going to pink that. And I think that'll do, just pinking this bit here, who did not look pleased to see me. What are you doing on our island? Questioned one of them. I'm Zoe. I've come from Norwich. It's terrible there, I answered quickly. The second boy, who eyed me menacingly, yeah, I'm happy with that one, snarled, you shouldn't be here. They formed a huddle, but I could hear their conversation. My stomach churned when it became clear that they thought I was a spy who was scouting for supplies. So a bit more information. So if you used one in each section, you could give yourself the same challenge to see if you can use the same ones, one in each section, sorry. I've used a lot of who. Maybe when you come to do yours, see if you can have one including which, just so you're using a breadth of different relative clauses. But as I've said, you've got my example and you'll have the typed up version available on your vocabulary sheet, and you have a whole ream of ideas that maybe hopefully will inspire you with an idea of your own that you can take a look at and maybe borrow from if you need to support your paragraph with further vocabulary. Okay, as always, really excited to read your wonderful writing when you upload it onto Seesaw. Please read it out loud to yourself before uploading, just to catch any errors such as punctuation for the relative clauses, as that's what we'd be expecting would be correct as this is the WALT. All right then, have a wonderful day everybody. Take care, and I can't wait to write with you paragraph 5 tomorrow. Bye bye now.